Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome back to Everyday Consent. Most of you are likely familiar with many of the foolish things that get said in the public discourse regarding sexual assault. People often excuse perpetrators' behavior by saying things like, boys will be boys. Men just can't control themselves when it comes to sex. Young people are just full of raging hormones. In much of the Western world and elsewhere today, it's still surprisingly common to hear perpetuated the idea that cis men are hypersexual. They always want sex and those urges must be satisfied. If they are presented with the possibility of sex, they just can't control themselves and certainly can't stop. This is, of course, not true. First of all, the idea that a person, male or otherwise, is but a slave to their own desires is terribly patronizing. Though it's not always easy, controlling sexual urges, as with any other urge, is possible. Think about it. Hunger is also a pretty powerful urge, but if you're a decent human being, you're not just going to eat whatever food is lying around. We're expected to make or buy our own food, or at least ask nicely if we can have a bite of our friend's pizza. Being hungry does not give you license to run into the nearest cafe and start chowing down on all the pre-made sandwiches. And unlike sex, you would literally die without food. Our society has a very strange mindset about sex and control. There's an assumption that sexuality is this supernaturally powerful force, and that people can't be expected to keep such urges in check. Our culture assumes sexuality in particular can override all other aspects of a person in an unpredictable and even dangerous way. This way of thinking is not only wrong, it's also quite harmful. It is partially this idea that can lead individuals, news outlets, and even law enforcement to say things like, boys will be boys, when confronted with cases of sexual assault where the perpetrators are young men. And in those same or similar cases, it can also lead to blaming the victim for their assault. If the perpetrators simply can't be expected to control themselves, then surely it lies on the shoulders of the victim to avoid the situation. Obviously, that's pretty messed up. Fortunately, most of us have started to realize that boys will be boys is a pretty terrible excuse for sexual assault. But this idea that sexual desire is uncontrollable is pretty pervasive and shows up in a lot of other areas. In a less extreme context, school dress codes have been a hot topic lately for similar reasons. Often, girls are required to adhere to dress codes to avoid distracting their straight male classmates. School administrators have said that short skirts and tight pants are highly distracting and have gone so far as to ban such items entirely so that students' dress does not become a distraction in the learning environment. Again, this is a perpetuation of the myth that people, especially young boys, are so incapable of dealing with their own sexual desire that it must fall to others to avoid the situation altogether. This is harmful to girls because they have to go out of their way to avoid distracting the boys. But it's also harmful to the boys who learn that they should want sex all the time and that they are not responsible for their own actions. But this idea of overwhelming sexual desire applies to more than just cis men. It applies to everybody, and in some surprisingly subtle but still harmful ways. In general, when you express a sexual desire or attraction, people think that you might act on that desire, whether or not you have a conscious intention to do so. Let me give you an example. Crushes. Almost everyone gets them at some point. Maybe someone you see when you go to Starbucks, your partner in chemistry class, or your favorite Jonas brother. Oh, they're not a thing anymore? Well, then your favorite One Direction member. Wait, they broke up? Damn it, Zane. Anyway, sometimes we get crushes on people that would not be reasonable or appropriate to get involved with. Like, say, a teacher, or a friend's partner, or a boss. In these situations, it can be frightening to even admit to someone that you have the crush, for fear that they'll judge you or even be angry. But think about that. Isn't that a bit odd? Why would someone be judgmental about you being attracted to your boss? Or angry about you being attracted to your friend's partner? It would probably not be appropriate for you to act on those desires, but there's no real harm in the desiring itself. So that anger or judgment is really coming from the worry that you will act on it, or that you'll only see that person as the object of your desire and be unable to interact with them in the professional or friendly way that you're expected to. But that worry could very easily be unfounded. Having a crush on someone doesn't have to control how you treat them or act around them. And if it doesn't affect how you act around them, then the only transgression has been your thoughts. And if someone is trying to police your thoughts, then that's a little too close to Orwell's 1984 that I'm really okay with. Seriously, if your friend tells you, ooh, that guy's burrito looks good, you're not gonna worry that they're gonna jump over the table and grab the guy's food out of his hands. Burrito! You, very reasonably, expect your friend to control themselves and maybe get their own burrito, just as we can and should expect people to manage their own sexual attractions. But even if you don't share your desire with other people, you might feel weird about it yourself. You might be upset at yourself for feeling this way, or even afraid. But again, this attraction is harmless if you don't act on it. You don't have to act on your desires, especially if you don't want to or have good reasons not to. You don't have to buy a Twinkie every time you feel like having one. And you don't have to jump in the car and go to Disneyland every time you want to see Mickey Mouse. Space Mountain! You have self-control, and you can exercise it if your desires would lead you down a path that you don't want to follow. Here's another example. When a person who is gay, bi, or anything besides straight and cis comes out, it can be a difficult and confusing time for them and those close to them. There are, of course, plenty of reasons for this, and every situation is unique. But a somewhat common response for friends of the same gender is, okay, they're gay. Oh, wait, are they attracted to me? This can be a source of a lot of anxiety. That same gender friend might worry that the whole relationship will change or even end because of that possibility of attraction. They might even consider ending the friendship themselves out of discomfort or fear. But why? All because they learned their friend's sexual orientation might, just maybe, include people like themselves. In this case, it's just the possibility of sexual attraction that's causing so much stress. Their friend has not yet, and may never, approach them in a sexual manner or even express any sexual interest in them. But the mere fact that they could leads to all manner of angst. People are so afraid of the uncontrollable nature of sexual desire that even thinking about the possibility of attraction can lead to worry about potential sexual advances. And this worry can be so strong that they might abandon existing friendships. You can see how this is problematic. Losing friends is exactly what a person coming out does not need. This concept shows up in other places too. When people touch or cuddle with friends platonically, it can lead to a lot of assumptions and confusion. Cuddling doesn't have to be a sexual thing, but we do often associate it with sex. So when two people are in a platonic friendship and one of them initiates or suggests that they be cuddly, the other friend might worry that they'll eventually want more. They might find it hard to believe that anyone could really agree to just cuddling, since cuddling so easily can lead to sex. But again, this worry is only due to the fear that sexual desire is some runaway train that once it gets started can't possibly be stopped. Think about a coffee shop. Plenty of people, when they go to buy coffee, also buy one of those delicious looking pastries. Coffee and pastry is definitely a tasty combination. But sometimes when you go to the coffee shop, you really just want coffee. The barista doesn't get all confused and ask, Are you sure you don't want a pastry? I just don't get how you could want coffee and not a pastry. But really, sometimes you just want coffee. Hi, I'd like a coffee. Oh yeah, sorry, we're all out of pastries. Oh, that's fine, I just want the coffee. Are you sure you don't also want a pastry? No, just the coffee's fine. Look, we don't have pastries, okay? Some of these are subtle things, but I think these subtle things are symptoms of the same problematic thinking that leads us to say, boys will be boys, or your spaghetti strap is hindering my son's learning. It stems from us seeing sexuality as frightening and overpowering, and us forgetting that we are all individually responsible for our own actions, even when we're horny. So let's try to combat this, and when we are confronted with a potentially frightening or confusing sexual desire, resist the urge to freak out. We need to hold people accountable for their actions, but also believe in our friends and our own abilities to control ourselves. Let me know down in the comments if you know of any other examples of this way of thinking. If you like this video, hit that like button, and if you want to see more from me, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks everyone, happy consenting, and I'll see you next week. Just put abs over on the side of the screen. Yeah.